Hey Bill, Bob Medlin again. I'd like to tell you about another miracle to illustrate creation. When Jesus was here 2,000 years ago, he was teaching, and there were 5,000 men and their families that were with him for 3 days, and they had nothing to eat. They were hungry, so Jesus asked his disciples to feed the people. Well, they didn't have anything either, so they said it would take a year's worth of wages to feed all these people. So Jesus said, well, what do you got? So they found a little boy that had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish that he was carrying, and he was willing to donate those. And so Jesus multiplied those 5 loaves and 2 fish and fed the 5,000 men and their families, probably 15,000 people. And then he asked his disciples, after everybody had their fill, to go and collect all the bread that was left over, all the pieces of bread. Well, they filled up 12 baskets full of bread. There was more bread left over at the end than there was at the beginning. That was an example of creating something out of nothing. In this case, Jesus did not have to go and plant seeds of grain, let the grain grow, and then harvest the grain, and then grind the grain, and then cook the bread. He created completely cooked bread out of nothing, enough to feed 5,000 men and their families. He didn't have to take a fish and cause the fish to let the fish grow, and then process the fish, and then cook the fish, and then he didn't have to do that. He had enough fish to feed those people. They were created out of nothing. God created completely cooked bread out of nothing. He created completely cooked fish out of nothing. That's an example of creation. God is the creator. Let me give you an example of another wonderful miracle. My wife and I was preaching. We were pastoring a church. I was previously an engineer. I love science, by the way. And I was preaching and that nothing's impossible with Jesus. He said if we just believe that anything is possible. So a young man came forward for prayer who was about 30 years old. We barely knew them, and I asked him what he wanted Jesus to do for him. He said, well, I was born colorblind. He said, I'd like to see colors. So that's amazing to me that even people would even ask, after being born without the proper number of color cones in his eyes, been colorblind all his life, to even ask. So I said, sure. Jesus said that if we believed, he would do it. So I just put my hand on his eyes and prayed for him and asked Jesus to put the missing color cones in there. Took my hands off his eyes, and he opened his eyes, and he looked up at a green plastic plant, and he said, oh my God. And he spun around, and he started looking at people's shirts and the colors and everything, and he was just totally amazed. And his wife said he couldn't keep his eyes on the road when he drove home. He could see color perfectly instantly. So the next Sunday, he brought a bunch of color chips from the paint store to show us all the colors he couldn't see. And he was in construction, wanted to drive a big rig truck, but he couldn't get a commercial license because a commercial license requires a colorblind test. And of course, he'd look at the colored numbers and dots and background, couldn't see anything before he was healed. But then he went down to the DMV and passed the test and got his commercial license. That too is an example of God creating something out of nothing. God's the creator. Stay tuned for part 3.